Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. Welcome to the first edition of Context, a new show on the BBC News Channel and BBC World News. On tonight's programme, Novak Djokovic says he still wants to compete in the Australian Open after a judge frees him from detention. The 34-year-old said he practised on court in Melbourne within hours of leaving his detention hotel. His family is delighted by the news.
This is a huge win for Novak and for his family and the whole free world.
A newly leaked email shows a top aide to Boris Johnson invited number 10 staff to a lockdown party at a time when social mixing was banned. And at high-level talks with the United States in Geneva, Russian officials say they have no intention of invading Ukraine. Tonight, with the context, our panellists Sonia Khan, former special advisor to Sajid Javid when he was Conservative Chancellor, and Amanda Renteria, top aide to Hillary Clinton in her 2016 presidential campaign. Hello, a new year, a new show. Welcome to the first edition of Context. At this hour each day, we'll be bringing you the best analysis on all the top stories with our panel of experts. They'll stay with us for the next hour to give us their insights and context on what's happening around the world. And we're going to start with Novak Djokovic, who has been released from an immigration detention facility in Melbourne. He was taken out of that hotel in this white people carrier, fans cheering his release after an Australian judge overturned the government's earlier decision to cancel his visa. Let's head out then to Sydney and we can speak to Tracy Holmes, who is a sports reporter for Australia's ABC News. Tracy, good to have you with us. So a decision is expected this morning. Any clues as to what might happen, and can the decision be appealed? Tracy Holmes, thank you very much indeed for that. Amanda, I've been looking at the State Department's travel guides just to compare how it looks vis-a-vis Australia's travel guidance. And actually, when you put up what the State Department has advised people, you can't travel to the United States unless you are fully vaccinated. And there are very limited exemptions. Children under 18, those who are medically unable to receive the vaccine, and emergency travellers who don't have timely access to a vaccine. So under those rules, Amanda, I can't see that Novak Djokovic would be allowed into the United States, would he? Which takes us neatly, or perhaps not so neatly, if you're sitting in number 10, to matters here in the UK. There is another development in the long-running saga surrounding the Downing Street parties during lockdown last year. Tonight, ITV have published an email from the Prime Minister's principal private secretary inviting number 10 staff to a drinks party on May 20th, 2020. In the email, Martin Reynolds writes, "It would be nice to make the most of the lovely weather and have some socially distanced drinks in the number 10 garden this evening. Please join us from 6 p.m. and bring your own booze." 40 people joined that party, and this was at the time of the first lockdown. Less than an hour before that party began, the then Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden was instructing the country that they should be following the rules and only meeting with one other person outdoors. Sonia, the government's defence the first time when these pictures emerged of a garden party on the 15th of May was that it was a working meeting. The email that we see here from Martin Reynolds makes it very clear it's a social gathering. It's a drinks party. How does number 10 defend that? Yeah, that's why managing the message is so important, why so many backbenchers, of course, have been asking questions about the number 10 operation. This is Context on the BBC, still to come. Investigators are piecing together just how 17 people came to die in New York's worst apartment fire in decades. We'll be live in the Bronx next. Let's take a quick look at some of the other stories making headlines here today. An independent inquiry will investigate how a serving police officer, Wayne Couzens, was able to abduct, rape and murder Sarah Everard last March. The first phase will look at his conduct during his career. It will also investigate whether any red flags were missed concerning him and his behaviour. 8 men who were abused by the convicted paedophile Barry Bennell more than 30 years ago have lost their High Court case against the Manchester City Football Club. The men, now in their 40s and 50s, said Bennell was a scout for Manchester City at the time. The judge ruled the club was not liable, but praised the men's bravery in coming forward. And Buckingham Palace has revealed how the Queen's Platinum Jubilee will be marked this year. The celebrations began today with the launch of a competition to invent a new pudding to commemorate the Queen's, the Queen's 70-year reign. There will be street parties and a concert featuring some of the world's best-known entertainers. Russian and American diplomats have just finished a crunch day in talks in Geneva, and with 100,000 Russian troops massed on the border with Ukraine, the stakes could hardly be higher. President Putin wants NATO to pull its forces out of former Soviet countries and to rule out Ukraine ever joining the NATO alliance. America says the Russian president is setting unrealistic expectations, effectively a dismantling of Europe's post-Cold War security. Well, let's bring into our discussion Kurt Volker, who served as US Special Representative for the Ukraine negotiations under President Trump. Kurt, it's good to have you on the programme again. Thanks for sparing us some time. I was just saying that the demands that were made by Russia looked unrealistic. Some said they were the pretext for invasion once they were inevitably rejected. But tonight, the Russians are saying they have no intention of invading Ukraine. What do you make of that? Yeah. That is a good point. Two further meetings coming this week, one at NATO on Wednesday and then one at the OSCE on Thursday. We'll see how they go. Kurt Volker, lovely to talk to you again. Thanks for coming on.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
We're going to turn briefly to the case in New York. Officials investigating whether a maintenance issue with an apartment door may have allowed smoke to spread through a high-rise building in the Bronx. 17 people were killed yesterday, including 9 children, after a heater in a third-floor apartment malfunctioned on Sunday. It appears that all those deaths were caused by smoke inhalation rather than burns. Neda Tawfik is in New York for us. Neda, what do we now know about the cause of the fire? What are the concerns for residents? Striking similarities with the debate we're having here in the UK. Neda Tawfik, thank you very much for that. First big test then for the New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Coming up on our programme, is Europe about to go the way of the United States and cut self-isolation to 5 days? We'll be speaking to President Biden's former top COVID advisor, Andy Slavitt, about the science and the criticism that's been aimed at the White House over its COVID messaging. Back in a few moments.
If you've got questions about the stories making headlines, Reality Check is here to help you get the facts straight. Our team of experts examine the evidence and cut through the spin. Join me, Chris Morris, here on BBC World News, or go to bbc.com/Reality Check.
Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. You're watching Context on BBC News. With the United States still reporting almost 1 million COVID cases per day, I'll be speaking with Andy Slavitt, who has advised the White House on its approach to the pandemic. Here in the UK, with the cost of living soaring, we're going to ask if the government will fulfil its pledge to cut taxes on home energy bills. If it smells fresh and it looks fresh, then the milk is probably safe to drink. A major supermarket is replacing the use-by dates and asking us to apply the sniff test. Very much not past their sell-by date. Tonight's panellists are back with the context. Sonia Khan, former Downing Street advisor to the UK Treasury, and Amanda Renteria, who was part of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign team. Welcome back. The good news in London is that the worst of the Omicron outbreak appears to be behind us, although the case numbers are still high and the case numbers in the rest of the country are still rising. In the worst case scenario, 25% of the public sector workforce could soon be under lockdown. And so the Prime Minister is considering going the way of the United States and cutting the length of time people need to self-isolate once they've tested positive. So, what is the science behind it? Let's talk to Andy Slavitt, who was advising the White House on its COVID-19 response last year. Andy, lovely to see you. Thanks for coming back to speak to us. Let's look at the science then. What is the case for 5 days of isolation? And does that start with symptoms or does that start with a positive test? OK, we'll have to let Andy go because his picture is frozen. But Andy Slavitt, if you can hear me, thank you very much indeed for coming on. With those workplace absences on the rise and with the inevitable costs that brings for some companies, many of them are tightening the rules. IKEA told its staff today that those who have not been vaccinated and who are required to self-isolate after contact with a positive COVID case will no longer get their full salary while they're off work. The move means that unvaccinated workers will receive as little as £96.35 a week under statutory sick pay. The average pay, just to compare that, for an IKEA shop worker is around £400 for an average working week. That's outside London. What do you make of that, Sonia? I mean, on the Conservative side, they're defending people's liberty and their people's right not to have the vaccine while encouraging them to do this. But I get the sense that companies facing an absentee challenge are starting to fill the void with their own mandates because the government's not going there. OK. Well, away from Downing Street parties, the pressure is building on the British Prime Minister to tackle the squeeze on the cost of living, which is pushing many families to crisis point. Inflation right now doesn't look as transitory as some central bankers thought it might be. In the 12 months to October 2021, the cost of food and drink rose by 1.4%. Energy bills increased by 6%, and they're expected to rise a lot more later this year. And the cost to fill up the car rose by more than 10%. To ease the pressure on people's finances, some are calling on the government to freeze taxes that are due to be introduced in the spring and to lower taxes, specifically VAT on energy bills. Cutting VAT on home energy bills was supposed to be one of the main dividends of Brexit. This is what Mr. Gove said at the time. I don't understand this because it is a Brexit dividend. This is the Prime Minister that got Brexit done. So why is he so resistant to cutting VAT on energy, Sonia? No, big decisions to come in the following weeks. This is Context on the BBC, still to come on the programme. Is sniffing your milk a good strategy to reduce food and drink waste? One British supermarket certainly thinks so. We'll be pouring through the changes. If you're watching at the beginning of our programme, you'll know that we were talking about Novak Djokovic and the mix-up in messaging between Tennis Australia and the rules that are set down by the federal government. ATP, the Tennis Association, has been speaking in the last few minutes. Just a couple of lines I wanted to bring you. Complications related to tennis player entry on Australia, says the ATP, shows need for clearer application of rules. And the events leading to Mr. Djokovic's Monday court hearing, they said, was damaging on all fronts. Certainly it is Tennis Australia that at the moment appears to be carrying the can and the blame for what has unfolded. We'll keep watching that. Now, the British supermarket Morrisons is scrapping the use-by dates it puts on its milk. Instead, you'll see a best before label on 90% of its own brand milk. Milk is the third most wasted food and drink product in the UK after potatoes and bread. The supermarkets say generations before us would give it the old sniff test, and we should too. And if it smells right, it probably is all right. I'm slightly loath, I have to say, Amanda, to put my nose in the fridge because my wife goes by the use it unless it walks rule. So sometimes I open the fridge and the vegetables are doing the lambada on the bottom shelf. I mean, literally, I think she's convinced herself that we're all far too sanitised and any bacteria, any mould at all is good for you. So nothing gets chucked away. But I'm completely the reverse. I'm the one that goes in there and starts chucking things out. What do you do in your house? Now, you're probably thinking, I hope you're thinking after 50 minutes of watching us, how did they make that first programme look so slick? Well, sometimes, let me assure you, it does go wrong, as this next clip will attest. Here is my dear colleague Laura Trevelyan out recording a trail for our January 6th riots coverage when this happened.
All right, you ready?
Yeah, when you're ready.
Okay. It's 1 year since the January 6th attack on the US Capitol, when supporters of Donald Trump stormed this building, trying to prevent the election victory of Joe Biden from being certified. On the anniversary, Oh my God. Oh God, Sam. Oh.
Oh, poor old Sam, our producer. For World Viewers, World News America's coming right up, and Laura is here. Poor Laura. Poor Laura. You could make a profit from that, you know. You should copyright it.
Well, do you know what, Christian? How do you turn a silly viral moment into something meaningful? I've been thinking about this when everyone from your mother-in-law to your kids says you're on TikTok. What do you do? I think the BBC should turn it into a non-fungible token, one of those digital works of art, and sell it to raise money for children in need. Because, Christian, kids have had an abysmal pandemic, and I would love it if me turning into an icicle could do something good for the children in Britain.
Well, I'm very pleased to see you're snug and warm in the studio this evening.
Bit of fibre.
Yes.
Come on, Christian.
A bit of fibre. Cut me in on the profits. I'm on commission. Our thanks to Amanda and Sonia, who've been with us tonight. I hope you'll get to know much more of them when they return in the coming days and weeks. Our panellists tomorrow will be the former Labour MP Ruth Smeeth and Ron Christie, Senior Advisor to Republican President George W. Bush. For viewers here in the UK, the BBC News at 10 is up next, and for those watching around the world, Laura will be safe and sound in the studio. And just remember, if you do want to get in touch with us and comment on our first programme here on Context, I am finally back on Twitter. It is at @CFraser BBC. I'm not convinced by the wisdom of it, but I am there, and I've been convinced that it's a good thing. So get in contact. We'll see you tomorrow.
Having a global perspective creates a deeper understanding.
Because in our connected world, all news is international.
To answer your direct question, we have a deal.
So, for in-depth analysis
of the biggest stories from the US and around the world.
And here is another army ambulance bringing in more COVID victims.
Join our team
and find out what is really going on.
BBC World News America.